And welcome into the Rotoworld Basketball Show. It's been a nice break, but I missed all the faces. But we got a new one on the screen, gentlemen, in case you're watching. This is Grady, joined by myself, Vaughn Dalzell, Dan Titus, and Raphielle Johnson. Western Conference Finals still going, boys. Eastern Conference Finals, however, that is over. So we got a lot to cover, including fantasy talk for next season. But, gentlemen, want to know how you're doing. Dan, I'm going to start with you. What's going on, man? Any pets at the crib we should know about?
Actually just got my dog back, but that's temporary. My son's allergic to dogs, so we're kind of testing it out, feeling out. So far, day one is good. If my dog runs in here, I'll try to make a little appearance here, a little cameo for Grady here. But everything is good, man. Just enjoying the fact that we didn't get a sweep, and we'll actually get basketball on Thursday, so it's a good look.
Yeah, honestly, the series was so close, so to end in a sweep would have not been right. But Minnesota Timberwolves, Raphael, don't know how you feel about it, but I think the T-Wolves could be one of the better contenders to come back from a 3-0 deficit. How about you, and how are you doing?
First off, I'm doing well. Thanks for asking. Good to see you guys back after a 2-week hiatus. As for a contender to come back, I'm not buying any of that. There's a reason why teams that are up 3-0 are 155-0 all time in the NBA. So I'm not going to go as far as to say they can win 4 in a row, but maybe things get a little interesting. They win at home in Game 5, because I think more often than not, the team that's down 3-0 has to win that Game 4 at home as opposed to on the road. Last year we saw it with Boston, where it was flipped around just like this, and they got it to 7. But look, man, as well as Karl-Anthony Towns played last night, I don't trust that man. So he's a talented player, but I need to see more. I'll just put it at that.
Yeah, 1,500 shots a day was trending a couple days ago when Kat said that. And, hey, second half, that was miraculous, man. That's what they exactly needed, because Ant Edwards, a huge first half to give them the lead. Karl-Anthony Towns, a huge fourth quarter really to put them ahead. So I was impressed. You hope to see that type of Cat in the next game. I got a cat around here somewhere, but may not make an appearance. But this is how I was thinking of it, Dan. The Minnesota Timberwolves, very young team, right? They're kind of like Grady right here. They're getting their teeth in. They're teething, right? They finally got that win now. They're back home. Do you believe they get this victory and extended, or is it fool's gold when it comes to the T-Wolves?
I think they could push it to 6 games at least. I mean, I think what you saw was Anthony Edwards really taking the step and the leap to be like, yo, I'm gonna rally this team and show what we need to do. Cat fortunately stepped up in the third and fourth quarter. He just got to stay out of foul trouble. All of them really do. But I think that they showed enough. Like, they've been in this series for much of the same part of it. They just have to lock up and defensively. And I think they did a great job making those adjustments, putting Jaden McDaniels on Kyrie Irving. I think was a great decision. He obviously struggled from the field way more than he was in the first 3 games. So I think if we see some of those adjustments continue, they could get a couple more games and potentially extend the series. But like Raph said, when it's all said and done, I don't think that they're going to be able to, just go 4 straight and ultimately upset the Mavericks here. I think this is going to be Celtics Mavs, and it's just a matter of when.
Yeah, we are expecting Dereck Lively to be back in this series, potential for Game 5. They were talking while the game was going on. But one thing that I found interesting, Raphael, with Dallas Mavericks is they let Luka Doncic kind of play the safety position in football on the basketball court, kind of let him roam a little bit, let that corner 3 sit open and let him kind of bait. Do you think that with Lively potentially back, does that let Minnesota attack Luka Doncic a little bit more this game?
I'm not really sure. I think Lively's impact may be more so on the offensive end, because when they have him out there, he's a big who can make some plays in the short roll. Daniel Gafford isn't that type of big, so it's a different look. They got back Maxi Kleber last night. He played 13 minutes. I don't think anyone was expecting too much from him, and that's how things played out. But I think getting Lively back for Game 5, his ability to protect the rim and also offensively, as I said, that'll be big for Dallas. And I don't think Luka and Kyrie are going to combine to shoot 13 for 39 again, as they did in Game 4. So I think that would be just as big a reason why I don't think Minnesota is going to come back and win this series.
Yeah, and the Maxi Kleber note's a good one too, because you didn't expect much from him, and it seemed like he didn't expect too much from himself either, especially with the 3 ball. He passed up on a few shots to dribble, penetrate, and pass out the teammates. So he was definitely getting a feel for the series, getting his legs back under him as well in that game, in my opinion. So I'm excited to see if Lively does come back, how that impacts them. I like the T-Wolves to get Game 5 at home, but would not be shocked to see Luka Doncic drop 35 or 40 points and still a victory too. But I do want the opinion on Cat because we spoke about him briefly, Dan. And his fantasy takeaways for this season, you might say that he played terrific at points in the season, left a little more to be wanted. His three ball was there for the majority of the year, if I'm not mistaken. But for next season, is this series impacting your thoughts on him next year, where you might draft him?
I think it is, because I think it's a matter of, do the Minnesota Timberwolves decide to explore trade offers for him? At this point, I feel like they definitely went far enough where it's like, hey, maybe we should consider running this back. That second apron is probably going to be approaching fairly soon. But I think that you could probably get a significant haul for Karl-Anthony Towns. And considering the way that Naz Reid has played all series, and you have a backup power forward that's as versatile as Kyle Anderson, and you got Leonard Miller there just waiting in the wings, who hadn't really get much time to play. I don't know. I think this squad has enough depth to move on from Cat. But from a fantasy perspective, he went, third round this past year, second, third round. He finished 45th in category league. So I think that that's probably more where I would slot him in there, probably like a fourth round guy, just considering that now he's probably going to be, he's definitely the second option, but, I think we could probably see more of Ant creating for others and that kind of eating into his overall share. Whereas before, when Ant wasn't this type of dude, Karl-Anthony Towns was a 20 and 10 guy. Whereas I think we're going to start to see his stats kind of dwindle as he still kind of tries to find his footing in an offense like that. But I wouldn't be surprised if the Timberwolves explore trades with him this summer, though.
Yeah, there's no harm in exploring those options. I would be surprised if they did move on, because you saw the success in the first two rounds primarily with Minnesota's size against their opponents, and having Gobert and Cat on the floor and how much that worked, and having a guy like Naz Reid who was so athletic coming off the bench. But in this series, Raphael, there's been people harping, hey, Naz Reid should be the one starting here. It should be him and Gobert in the lineup, which would be interesting. And I know you caught, being a Thunder supporter this year, you caught the Thunder's GM talking about how they hit and miss on Hayward, and they would like to run it back and let that team kind of get better as time goes on. Minnesota, similar team in that retrospect. So do you think they move on from Cat, and where are you putting him next year?
I don't think they will. And I think the variable that also needs to discuss is their ownership situation. Like, who's going to be owning the team next year? And what are they going to, how are they going to handle the financial situation with the cap? Because I think Cat's new deal goes into effect next year, and he's getting paid a significant amount of money. That may limit what they're able to do in terms of potential trade partners. Because it's quite clear, like Dan said, Anthony Edwards' role is only going to get larger as he continues to gain experience, and as Mike Conley gets older. Because I don't know exactly when he will retire, but I think there will be a point where Anthony Edwards is going to be that scoring point guard that we've seen for a lot of other teams, like a Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Ja Morant, right on down the line. So I think in terms of Cat and drafts, I think fourth round, where Dan said, I think that's his point, his ceiling right now. Maybe he can exceed that by a bit, but you're not expecting too much beyond that, to be honest with you. So I think fourth round is pretty safe for him.
Yeah, we question how much better Cat can really get. His size, his speed, athleticism, especially with his three-point shooting. He is one of the best three-point shooting players in the NBA. But at some point, that has to come back down to what it could be. And it looks like it's been like that in this playoffs, except for the previous game. Excited to see what Game 5 what happens at Game 5, and if we're talking about this next week at all. But most likely not, gentlemen. And didn't think that we'd be talking about the Boston Celtics and Pacers, because when I was in Mexico, I turned on the end of that Knicks-Pacers series, and I switched the channel, and when the Boston-Indiana games came on, I was pretty much feeling the same way, gentlemen. Boston was the superior team there. I felt like nothing was very surprising. Indiana played very hard, especially when Halliburton went out. You expect when the best player is out, the rest of the team will rally and play punch you in the mouth, surprise you. That's what they did, but ultimately Boston was too good. So, Raphael, I'll start with you. Anything surprising in that series at all?
Not really, especially once Halliburton went out. I mean, we tried to tell you, Pacers fans, what happens when your best players get injured. It wasn't just idle excuses. Like it's real. It's hard. Yeah, I think if anything, we saw Boston in their evolution in terms of crunch time play. Like that's been a question for quite some time with this group. No such issues in this series. Game 1, Indiana was the one that faltered late in regulation, and Boston pulled away in overtime. And then games 3 and 4, Boston made the plays down the stretch. I think they erased an 18-point deficit in game 3 to come back. You've got Drew Holiday making big plays on both ends of the floor. Jaylen Brown, probably the best basketball he's played in his career these 4 games. Jason Tatum's been there. Derek White. Al Horford hit 7 3-pointers in a game. And now they're going to get Porzingis back. You've got over a week to rest before game 1. I don't know who. It's probably going to be Dallas, obviously. The odds certainly favor them to come out of the West. But with Boston's lineup looking at what it will be when they get Porzingis back, they're going to be extremely difficult to beat next week.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. And his size is going to be much needed, I think, especially Daniel Gafford, been very physical. Dereck Lively, also a very lengthy big man. So KP would help a lot in that lineup. Dan, what was the most surprising thing for you, if anything, in that series?
I think it was the growth of Andrew Nembhard. For me, I couldn't help but think it was like a similar ascension that I saw in Jalen Brunson when Luka Doncic went down in Dallas. It was like just the way that he stepped up and took the mantle for not only handling playmaking duties, but also being that assertive scorer, especially in the mid-range. And, I mean, this dude averaged 21, 8 assists, 4 rebounds, had a 4-to-1 assist-to-turnover ratio in the conference finals. I'm wondering where I'm going to draft him next year because, I think that the Pacers are in a really interesting scenario where there is a possibility that Pascal Siakam doesn't return, right? I don't know that he could get offered. He's an unrestricted free agent, so someone could pay him an absurd amount of money. And that would then open up the door of, okay, well, Nembhard already did get a majority of the starts in the season, but what does that mean for Ben Shepherd? What does that mean for Benedict Mathurin? There could be a lot of questions from a fantasy perspective of how this Indiana Pacers team looks going into next season. But I think I came away pretty convinced that Andrew Nembhard is a starting 2 guard in this league. And if Halliburton ever gets hurt, I feel very confident of him not just being a waiver wire type dude that he was the last couple of seasons. He should be a person that's probably rostered as a late round draft pick going into next season based off what I saw in the playoffs.
Yeah, Andrew Nembhard certainly surprised me. I mean, I thought his game was going to drop off a little bit there in game 4 and did not at all. I mean, if anything, he was far more impressive. Also, TJ McConnell, too, played very, very well in that series, and his play did not drop off whatsoever. He showed that he was not scared to get in the paint every single time. I would say the most surprising thing, and wanted your opinions on this too, was Jaylen Brown winning Eastern Conference MVP over Tatum. Because, Raphael, you said that was probably the best that Brown's played in quite some time. And, you look at the numbers, Tatum clearly had better numbers when it comes to points, rebounds, assists, minutes, turnovers, that type of thing. But Jaylen Brown's impact was felt at the second half of most of those games. So, do you agree with Brown winning, Raphael, or you think Tatum kind of got snubbed?
I actually do agree with it. I thought Brown was the more efficient player in that series. He was in the high 70s from the foul line. We've seen him struggle from the foul line in the past. I think he averaged a good, 30 points per game in a series. He had that big 40-point night in game 2. So I'm fine with the pick. I think a lot of times when we look at these major awards, they tend to come down to narratives. Like Super Bowl MVP is usually the quarterback, but I think the voters got it right. It was a close vote from what I understand, but I think Jaylen Brown winning it was certainly fair.
Yeah, at the end of the game 4, I think impacted a lot of people's decisions too, to go with Brown. And not saying that was wrong at all, but I do know that at halftime of game 4, the betting odds suggested that over $2,000 need to be wagered to win 100 on Tatum to win the Eastern Conference MVP. So the fact that happened, some people were upset about it. Me did not care, obviously. I was in Mexico on a beach. But, I think Tatum, numbers-wise, looked like he should have won that. Dan, what's your opinion? Who would you have voted for?
I think I would have voted for Jaylen Brown because I just feel like he made more impactful plays. I mean, when he hit that corner 3 there's that one sequence, I think it was in game 3 or it was game 2. I can't remember. But I remember Tatum took an ill-advised turnaround 2-pointer. They got lucky, grabbed the rebound. And I think Jaylen Brown was just outside on the 3-point line, like, yo, bro, pass the ball. What are you doing? And then for him to make that clutch 3-pointer to get them into overtime and then eventually win, that stole the momentum of the series. And then when you couple that with Jaylen Brown's defense, he had a couple crucial blocks in the late games of game 4. I thought that he just played better. Tatum shot 30% from 3. That was the lowest. I mean, he's actually really been struggling from 3 in the playoffs. Whereas, Jaylen Brown was like 50%. Like he shot 56 from the field. Like I just felt like, yeah, Tatum had more rebounds by 3, but I think Jaylen Brown made more of an impact. And I just want to shout out Jaylen Brown for a second because he wasn't that great of a fantasy player this year. This guy's a 5th round dude, and he finished in like the top 80. He did say in the post-game presser that he never gets the respect that he deserves on defense. And I think that was a really interesting note and something I'll be paying attention to next season because I think he really wants to get that all-defensive team. So if we see any kind of uptick in steals or blocks for him, like that would bring that 3 rounds he dropped substantially back up. So glad that he got it. I think he was deserving of it. I wouldn't have been mad if they gave it to Tatum too. I would have gotten it, but I'm not mad at Jaylen Brown getting it either.
Yeah, and I mean, game 1 seems like so long ago that you forget about that 3 because it went the way that you expected the series to probably go 4-0, 4-1. But if if he doesn't make that play, Indiana wins. Much different series. The dogs are out today. They're out, I'm saying. I got 2 Pomeranians in the corner going crazy. Just for the viewers watching, there's 4 dogs here and 2 cats. So your boy's working on top of it. But I wanted the opinion, Raphielle, on the Pacers series or the Pacers fantasy outlook for next season too, because we spoke on Siakam. He may not be there. So I definitely want you to talk about if he is there, what his potential is. But those other guys, Nesmith, Mathurin, definitely Nebhard too. Where are you looking to draft these type of players?
I think obviously Tyrese Halliburton is going to be a first rounder. I think that much is clear. Miles Turner, he kind of went quiet this series, but I thought he played well against the Knicks. He's someone who has, in my opinion, has top 25 potential. I just don't think I would draft him that high. I think you're maybe like a 4th round pick or something like that. And then you kind of hope that he raises his ceiling a bit. But I was, as much as the Knicks-Pacers rivalry, as big as it is, I was happy to see Miles kind of get to go on this run because he's been through a lot in Indiana in terms of, those teams not playing up to expectations. So it's been good to see him get a conference finals run. I think the Nesmith-Mathurin conversation is probably going to be the big one for fantasy managers. Nesmith, once he moved into the starting lineup, ended up being a top 100 player by the end of the regular season. I think he's a better fit for that lineup, especially if Siakam is re-signed, than Mathurin. Mathurin, pretty much a points and threes guy in terms of fantasy value. Didn't give you too much when he was in there. I think he's better being like a potential anchor for that second unit offensively than as a starter. But if you lose Siakam, you're going to need that scoring from somewhere. So I think that's going to be probably the biggest storyline, Siakam's free agency, and then how that impacts Nesmith and Mathurin going into next season.
Yeah, and then what's your opinions on that too? If Siakam does leave, who are the biggest winners in Indiana?
Yeah, I feel like Nesmith could be – this is going to be a throwback for some. I feel like Nesmith could be a Raja Bell who, when he was with Phoenix, he was a top 80 player for 4 seasons.
Yep.
And he's the type of guy that, he doesn't need a lot of volume. He's efficient. He'll give you the defensive stocks, and he can hit threes. So I think that there's actually a better path for him to be a fantasy asset in category leagues than Mathurin, who we know will struggle with his efficiency. He doesn't really do much for stocks. He's really just a bucket. But to your point, to both of your guys' points, if Siakam's not there, I would expect Mathurin to have a greater role, even though he kind of struggled. I don't think he struggled this season because his numbers were actually pretty comparable. He just didn't get better, which I don't know that makes necessarily he's worse, but he was just, I guess he was just even, right? So I would like to see another level to what Mathurin can do. But Nesmith, I think, is a solid guy. I think you could pick him as probably a late round, probably like an 8th to 10th round type of guy. who's the other guy you mentioned? Oh, Miles Turner. So interestingly enough, his blocks have gone down each of the last 4 seasons. The first time he's been under 2 blocks a game since his rookie year. That's something I would monitor because, as Raph stated, like numbers wise, he's very attractive in that, he could be a top 25 type dude. But if he's not blocking shots, that's going to bump him down to like 4th, 5th round. So I wouldn't feel comfortable taking Miles Turner in the future unless we see like this random, spike in blocks inside of the 4th round.
Yeah, that's a good point too. He's disappeared a few times in that Boston series. Expected a lot more from him consistency-wise, especially when Halliburton was down. But Dan, honestly, a lot of that was a blur after you said Raja Bell. Great comparison. But were you playing fantasy when Raja Bell was in the NBA? Is that
yeah,
fact?
I definitely was. Because another guy, I was trying to figure out who was the player I was thinking about? I was trying to compare somebody to Sean Marion, and that's how I got down this rabbit hole of like, oh shit, Aaron Nesmith is Raja Bell. But yeah, I was definitely playing around that time, man. I'm an old head in terms of fantasy.
Sean Marion came up in my car ride home from Mexico when I was driving from the Pittsburgh airport because I showed my brother Jeremy Sochan free throw.
Yeah.
And he said, that's uglier than Sean Marion shot. And I said, oh, man, that's a throwback name.
Yeah.
Sean Marion, depending how you like him. That was a beautiful shot or an ugly shot. But to each their own. We all get that opinion.
Amazing fantasy player, though.
Yeah, Mr. Do It All. A lot of great guys in that era. And I've been playing 2K the last few days, so I can go on and on. But before that, we got some more fantasy stuff to look at on the other side and some predictions to make. But first, the biggest stars battle along the clay courts of Roland Garros for a chance to be crowned a Grand Slam champion. You can stream the French Open on Peacock today through June 9th. That's NBC and Peacock, the French Open. Now, we did say we were going to look at some fantasy outlooks for teams that were eliminated in the second round and on. The Thunder are a good spot to start there, Raphael. And, of course, you get the honors because you were the guy that pushed the train on them all season long. But SGA should be a first-rounder. Chet Holmgren, borderline first-rounder, right? And then Jalen Williams. Where do these guys end up?
I think SGA, we discussed this in the past, like Victor Wembanyama's the first overall pick for a lot of people, and rightfully so. Right behind him, I would have SGA and Nikola Jokic, just because the overall impact that those guys can have on the game. SGA, highly efficient. He's pretty much, I wouldn't say he's a lock to score 30 points per game, but he was pretty close to that once again this season. So top 3, top 5 at worst, if you believe in, like, say, a Joel Embiid being healthy enough to give you a good 65, 70 games of production. As for Chet Holmgren, we actually talked about this on a different podcast earlier today. I asked, could he be someone who sneaks into the first round? And coming back on it, I don't think I would go that high on him. But I think using a top 20 pick on Holmgren wouldn't be the worst idea. Now, the one variable at play here is, what will Oklahoma City do in the offseason in terms of strengthening the center position behind him? They really didn't have any options that Mark Daigneault was willing to commit to, whether it be Mike Muscala or Bismack Biyombo. So not expecting anything from those guys if they remain in Oklahoma City. But if they can add an actual serviceable center, maybe that gets Holmgren off the 5 a little bit. And then you're looking at how does that impact the Josh Giddey. Like we discussed him in the past, played less than 15 minutes per game in the second round. If anybody's going to be moved to add to that roster, I think it's going to be him because he's extension eligible, and I don't know how Oklahoma City can justify giving him a rookie level extension given the fit and the production. So, last but not least, Jalen Williams, top 50 player, I think, easily. I'd rather take him in like the 4th or 5th round than a lot of these wings. So I think he's someone that you're going to want to target in that portion of drafts because you wait any longer, he's most likely not going to be there.
Yeah, I think the real hoopers are going to be the ones drafting Jalen Williams next year, in those earlier rounds, the 4th, 5th rounds. The common person that's not doing many mocks are not going to be taking Jalen Williams probably where he should be landing next year. So he's the guy that probably has skyrocketed the most in value-wise for OKC Thunder this season. Dan, saw you throw up the peace sign. I'm assuming that means Josh Giddey you're no longer a Thunder, bro. Was that right?
That's correct, man. I feel like they know what they need to do this offseason to become a championship team. They're already obviously a playoff contending team. They had the best record this past season, came up short. I think that they need to sub out someone that's like a stretch wing that can also play defense. So there's going to be a ton of them on the free agent market. They also need to invest in a big man. I've already seen reports that they're interested in Isaiah Hartenstein. They're looking at Jonas Valanciunas. They're looking at Nick Claxton potentially. The Knicks got a couple decisions to make there. I would like it if you would.
They need to pay him. We'll get to him later, but they need to pay him.
They do. But I think someone might try to pay him more. We'll see. But OKC, man, I feel like Giddey's probably the guy that needs to go to make this something more than it is right now. As Raph said, SGA, top 3 pick easily. Jalen Williams, I would probably be willing to go up as high as 3rd round for him because I think he's going to be that much better. He's going to continue to become this like Kawhi Leonard type player in terms of his efficiency and what he can do on the defensive end. And then Chet, I think I've cooled on him being a late round first because I saw Raph talking to Dan Besbris of the Old Man Squad earlier today, and I thought that Dan brought up, I think maybe Raph did too, was just the concern about Chet's role and what he would need to do to get to first round value. And typically when you're taking players in the first 2 rounds, these guys are like 30%, 25% and up usage guys. Yeah. I don't know that Chet's going to command that yet. If he can attempt, 4 or 5 more shot attempts, so he can get up to 20 points per game on that efficiency. Sure, we could get her behind an early first or a late first, excuse me. But with the defense and where his current, production's at, I think he's looking like a solid, 2nd, 3rd round guy.
Yeah, I was honestly kind of disappointed in Chet Holmgren's production in that series against the Mavericks. I know that he probably wasn't going to command, the 20 and 10 numbers that everyone wants to see, but 15 and 6, I thought that he would do a little bit better than that during that series. But he is a slender man and shooting 22% from 3 on almost 5 3-point attempts per game. I mean, you're going to need that to improve. But again, second playoff series in his career, I expect Chet Holmgren to be better, but I don't think I'd be taking a first round flyer on him next season. We spoke on Nikola Jokic, and you said, Raphael, that you consider him number 3 on your list. Guys like Jamal Murray, though, Aaron Gordon, Michael Porter Jr., all these guys continue to play the same role next year with Denver. So does their value stay the same, or is there anybody that you're looking at maybe taking a little earlier or later next year?
I actually have Jokic 2nd. I would take him 2nd and SGA 3rd, but that's pretty much a coin flip there. We pretty much know what we're going to get from him at this point. It's just a matter of how much longer is he going to want to play basketball before he heads back to Serbia and tends to his horses, But I think we know what we're going to get there. I think Jamal Murray, the concern is his health. He struggled to stay healthy this season, also in the playoffs. I think he can be a top 50 player, but I don't know if I trust him enough to play the games needed to justify that type of pick. I guess 4th round, I would be fine with that, but I don't think I would go any higher than that with Murray. Aaron Gordon, I think he has top 100 potential, but he's another guy. Like, do you draft him that high? Like, I don't know if I would do that. I think Michael Porter Jr., he really hasn't given them the supplementary playmaking that I think he's capable of, or maybe he just isn't capable of it. I think that opened things up a bit more for Gordon in terms of, in that dunker spot and being able to not just be that catch and dunk guy, but someone they can give the ball in the wing and let him make some plays too. So those 2 guys will be interesting to watch because, Porter should be better, let's be honest. But is he capable of being better? I think that's going to be the question at play here.
Yeah, I don't think there's much guys outside of Nikola Jokic that I really want in fantasy on Denver because there's just there's such a good all-around team, and you know what you're getting every night out of these guys, but it's nothing special to me, Dan, which may be a little disrespectful. Love Jamal Murray in his game, love the impact that these other role players have, but fantasy-wise, who are you drafting for Denver next year?
I'll start with, Nikola Jokic is obviously a must-have. I think Jamal Murray is interesting to me. Where he goes in drafts, though, like he's usually a fourth-round guy. I don't think you're going to get too much higher of value out of him unless Nikola Jokic goes down. Like I feel like his ceiling is probably 23, 24 points per game, 5 boards, 6 assists-ish. So if he hits that, like I think you're going to get what you paid for, but I wouldn't, I wouldn't say that it's worth pulling up for like a second-round draft pick to get Jamal Murray. I'm not expecting that kind of a leap. Michael Porter Jr., he's kind of one of those mid-round guys that you'll find around the Tobias Harris territory that, Porter Jr. was solid, but to Raph's point, he doesn't really do that much more than what we've already seen. Like, I think we can expect 17 points a game, 16, 17 points, a shade under, 8 rebounds, something like that, with like maybe 0.8 blocks. But outside of that, like the 3-pointers is really only what he gives you. So I don't need him on my roster, but like if he falls, like I'd be happy to have him. The one guy that I feel like I always wind up having on my team is Aaron Gordon. And it's really because I think that he offers a lot of where he's being drafted in fantasy. He gets you like 4 assists in that dunker spot. He can give you 10 rebounds on occasions. And he also can score over 11, 12 points per game at a high clip. The only problem with him is that he can't shoot free throws to save his life. But outside of that, he actually gives you a pretty good amount of value. So if you can punt free throws, he's pretty much a top 100 player. One other guy that always kind of hovers there is Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. Good 3-and-D guy, but like I think he's more of a back-end depth type of person that can help you in steals and threes. But yeah, to your point, Vaughn, I understand what you're saying. Like there's not much of a ceiling for guys when Nikola Jokic is like the man. Like everyone pretty much being drafted at their ADP and they perform, around that mark.
Yeah, I think that's the perfect way to put it, better than how I said it. But I do like the breakdowns. Go ahead, Raphael.
I just have a quick question. Like KCP has a player option for this summer. So I guess the question for all of us is if he were to opt out and go elsewhere, how does that impact, say, a Christian Brown in terms of how we look at him fantasy-wise? Because I think between he and Peyton Watson, it was a bit of a disappointing year in terms of their consistency or lack thereof. But losing a starter could open things up for them or maybe even a Julian Strawther within that rotation for next year.
That's a good point.
What's that player option looking like?
15.4.
I feel like he can make more than that. Yeah, he could definitely make more
than
that.
Take that. Market. I'd take that if I was him.
Really? I feel like his skill set. I mean, put him on another team, man. That's a nice piece. I mean, would you pay him $18 million a year, $19 million a year? I feel like I would. I don't know, but I think it does. If KCP leaves, I think Christian Brown is the person that will probably step into an opportunity there. I would prefer it to be Peyton Watson just because I'm obsessed with the way that he plays defense and would just love to see him with like 25 minutes a night. But I wouldn't be mad at Christian Brown. Like I think Christian Brown could probably be looking into like the late round territory. But to Vaughn's point, it's like how many more mouths can be fed in this Denver offense in this scheme. And, KCP is already a low-end usage guy, and I'd expect the same for anyone that's replacing him too.
Yeah. I not so much in love with taking him in fantasy, but certainly he could impact the team with his 3-and-D status, no matter where he's at, especially a playoff contender like Dallas, if he chooses to stay with them. But wanted to talk about 2 Eastern Conference teams before we talk about 2 head coaches, guys. Cleveland, we'll start there before we hit with Raphael's New York Knicks, but Cleveland – obviously fired JB Bickerstaff. We question whether Donovan Mitchell will be there. Then they got the tandems of Jared Allen and Evan Mobley as well. So, Raphael, I'll start with you. What's Cleveland going to look like next year?
That's a really good question. I think we need to figure out who the head coach is going to be. But first and foremost, are they going to be able to get Donovan Mitchell to commit to a new deal? The worst possible thing for them would probably be to have him go into a contract year. And if he does, how's the roster going to look around him? Like, he and Darius Garland, I think it's been a solid fit, but not one that's a difference maker. Like, they beat Orlando in 7 games, and then Boston, they just looked, once Mitchell went down, they looked thoroughly overmatched. Jared Allen was out for a significant portion of the playoffs here with the rib injury. He and Evan Mobley's long been an awkward fit. Defensively, it's really good, but offensively, Mobley, while he can step out and shoot, he still isn't that type of spacing 4-man. I think he's at his best where he's the 5 and can move around all over the floor as the only big on the court. So they're going to have to figure some things out. The Bickerstaff firing, I don't know. It's like with every other firing, guy gets booted out of the door, then you hear every other story about he did this or he didn't do that. He wanted too much control. I mean, he's the head coach. Like, of course he wants control. Like, he should have control over what they do in practice and stuff. But, I don't know. I think good luck to Cleveland, but yeah, I don't know. I think it's good they got Orlando when they did, because I think Orlando's going to be well past them next year.
Yeah, 100%. And you could see as the series was going on, Orlando was probably the better team between the two. Definitely worried me, someone that was, writing about Cleveland winning that series. But I agree. I think Orlando is going to be one of the sleepers of the Eastern Conference for the next few years. I think Cleveland, the wheels are falling off. They tried the reload. It looked cute for a minute, but I don't think that team fully bought in, and they were pretty injured. Not as injured as the Knicks, Raphael, but they were banged up a couple times this year. So, Dan, what is your opinion on Cleveland next year? Is anyone you're going to be willing to take in fantasy, especially if Donovan Mitchell's gone? I'm assuming it's Darius Garland, right?
Yeah, I don't know where to really assess this team yet because so much is in flux. You know what I'm saying? Like, I've seen reports of Darius Garland's team potentially wanting out if they decide to re-sign Donovan Mitchell. Same goes to the other side. Jared Allen and Evan Mobley, that front court tandem doesn't really work in unison. There's not enough spacing, as Raph stated. So, like, this team could look completely different next year. I'm cool if one of those two, if one of the backcourt or the front court is out of there, I'd be okay taking the guy that's still there. But I do think Evan Mobley's been a bit overrated in fantasy over the last several years. Like, he's going in like the 3rd round, and he performs at like 4th round value because of his efficiency. But similar to Chet Holmgren, it's the same problem. Like, he just doesn't get enough usage in this offense, and he hasn't shown enough from beyond the perimeter to like really be a focal point of the offense. So, I don't really know where I stand here. I think we need to see how this all kind of shakes out. I just know that whatever this version of the Cleveland Cavaliers is, I don't think we're going to see it going into next year. So if one of those point guards go, or maybe if both Garland and Mitchell go, I'd be interested in looking at Craig Porter Jr. for those in dynasty leagues. Like, that dude, every time he got a chance to play, he was an outstanding player. And definitely showed. I got to see him in summer league last year. I was like, oh, this guy definitely looks like he could be a player in this league. So that's deep in the trenches. Other than that, Max Strus was kind of a surprise this season. He could probably come pretty cheap. And, if some of these high usage guys are gone next year, potentially we could see some other role player kind of step up. Karis LeVert, another guy that definitely would be watching for going into the next season.
Yeah, a lot of eyes will be on Cleveland and fantasy. We just need to see how this offseason shifts gears. And if we get Donovan Mitchell back, I hope that he's on a new team, and I want to see him, back in the playoffs with a better contender. But we shall see what happens. But this is the part of the show we all been waiting for. Let's not beat around the bush. Raphael, I mean, the Knicks, it was a fun series. I really wish that they were ones playing the Boston Celtics, but sadly did not end up that way. Just simply ran out of bodies. What is going to happen this offseason? What do you want to see happen for the New York Knicks?
First and foremost, I want everybody to get healthy. Julius Randle, OG Anunoby, Jalen Brunson broke his hand in Game 7. Josh Hart had the abdominal strain. Bojan Bogdanovic that it was near comical how many guys got hurt, and yet they got to a game 7 in the second round. So I think if anything, you're watching to see what happens with Anunoby and Hartenstein. Anunoby, like Pascal Siakam, will be an unrestricted free agent. And this is the first time he's been able to test his market in that fashion. Given how popular 3-and-D wings are, especially one as impactful as Anunoby, he's going to fetch high 30s per year, I think, minimum. So he's a guy, given what the Knicks gave up, I think they're going to put all they can into re-signing him. As for Hartenstein, he's raised his stock immensely. He can be a solid secondary playmaker in that center role. Better rim protector, and he probably gets credit for it too. So he's going to be a guy who can really help teams out who need that option to 5. He's another guy I think the Knicks need to pay handsomely. I don't know how much they're going to be able to pay him because they're kind of limited since they don't have his bird rights. But Mitchell Robinson's injuries kind of need to keep Hart in the fold here. So those two guys are going to be priorities to hold on to. Hart, DiVincenzo, Brunson, they were outstanding, when on the floor and healthy. So you're just hoping to get healthy. I think the one thing you're also hoping is that James Dolan just lets Leon Rose and World Wide West and those guys do their jobs. That's what he's done, and that's why this team has kind of experienced this resurgence, because when that guy comes down from his ivory tower and demands a star, something bad usually happens on the trade front. So let's just let those guys do their jobs and hopefully re-sign everyone, because that can be a really good team next year if everybody returns.
Yeah, I agree with that. That's one of the teams that would be very, very dangerous next 3 to 5 years. And I could see an NBA Finals appearance in the New York Knicks near future. And I'm sorry, Dan. I thought that the Sixers would have been here, but things just work out how they work. And I don't see that in the Sixers near future. But do you see the Knicks potentially making an NBA Finals over the next 3 to 5 years if they can keep this core team together?
I guess that depends on if Thibodeau runs them into the ground again.
Oh, come on, man. We gotta stop that.
Josh Hart played his ass off.
So Dan,
who else are you gonna play? Jacob Toppin?
Yeah,
I don't disagree with you.
Maybe you should have played Alec Burks earlier, but
yeah.
Other than that,
you didn't really have any options. I feel you, but yeah. What were we gonna say, Vaughn?
I want to ask you: do you feel like these injuries would have happened nonetheless, or do you think they happened because Tom Thibodeau and he probably continued to push these guys to the limit?
I feel like that. Yeah, he pushed them to the limit. I'm not saying that he had many other options, but it is what it is. Look at the track record. Anybody that plays for Thibodeau is gonna get hurt at some point, right? That's just what happens. I'm not going to say that I don't think that they can't go to the finals. They can, but it's just going to be the battle of attrition. And Julius Randle's injury was a fluke injury. I want to see what he looks like with this version of the squad, because there could be some questions of whether this team's going to gel as well as they were with Randle in the lineup versus not. Anunoby was the key piece that I think that really unlocked them. His on-off court numbers were insane with him in the lineup. So I think they got to make a priority. That should be the top priority in bringing him back. Hartenstein, I think, is also another critical piece because Mitchell Robinson seems to just constantly get hurt. So it would be a nice insurance policy to have him there. But I also understand that, he's making $14 million a year. I don't know. It's going to be a lot of investment in your front court if they bring him back. I think Bojan Bogdanovic is probably making too much money, but the good thing is the Knicks have a ton of cap space, so they can afford to keep him on the roster. This could be one of the best second units in basketball, which I think would help Tibbs have less reliance on the starters if he actually has a healthy, second unit here. So the Knicks are going to be a scary team, man. And I don't know. Shouts to them for making all the right moves. They have 2 draft picks in the 24 draft that hopefully they can get I think they should get a shooting guard, like a wing. I don't know which one I'm eyeing yet, but having the 24th and 25th picks, they could probably package that and something else to get a higher draft pick potentially. They got some moves to make. So, as Raph stated, just keep doling away from the team and let everyone else handle business because it's been working out pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the roster, the depth chart, and you can see the Knicks are clearly 1 through 10, one of the deepest teams in the NBA. If not, if you want to go 1 through 12. I mean, Brunson, DiVincenzo, Hart, Burks, McBride. You got Anunoby, Randall, Hartenstein, Robinson, Achua, Bogdanovic. I mean, you just go down the list, and they have a squad. They just need to, I think, bring these guys back, like Raphael said. And it's certainly interesting because if a guy gets moved, it's probably Bojan or Julius Randle, if I'd have to say. But if you had to move one player before we move on, Raphael, who would you be moving from the Knicks?
Well, only $2 million of Bojan's contract for next season is guaranteed. So I think that's one way to clear up space. I don't know. It depends on how invested they're in the star chasing, experience from a trade standpoint, because I think that's what gets them. That's what's gotten them in trouble in the past. Where been so dead set on acquiring another star that they give up too much, and it ends up kind of hamstringing the franchise from a building standpoint. So I don't know, man. I think the Anunoby situation is going to have a significant impact because you're going to have some other high-priced wings out there who could potentially be not so much free agency, but possible trade targets, based on what's going to be out there this summer. So I don't know. I think how they figure this out, and you bring up the Randall, how he's going to fit into this rotation once healthy, if everyone's back. I think it's also a good fantasy question too. He kind of disappointed from an efficiency standpoint this year, but he's someone that, if you remove turnovers, is more than capable of being a top 70, top 75 player. So I think Brunson's the cornerstone fantasy-wise, but after him, Randall, DiVincenzo has top 100 potential. Hart as well, even though he's not much of a shooter. Everything he brings to the table can be really good in category leagues.
Yeah, still mad Josh Hart didn't give me a triple-double in that last series. That's all right, bro. We'll run it back next year when you guys make the playoffs. I mean, for Anunoby, I'll hit a point on him. Why would you not want to play at MSG and make more money? This isn't the Brooklyn Nets, my man. But I think that the Knicks are certainly in a good position to make themselves a top 3, top 4 seed next year and for the next few years. Just hope OG comes back. And Julius Randle, don't be a ball stopper next year because they're a 50-win team and up. So, Raphael, I might be joining the Knicks gang next year because we know how I feel about my Bulls. But on the other side of this, we got 2 head coaches to talk about and some fantasy impacts they could have. But first, can Nelly Korda continue her historic run on the LPGA Tour? Find out this week when she competes against the world's best at the U.S. Women's Open presented by Ally. Tune in Saturday at 3 p.m. Eastern, only on NBC and Peacock. So Clippers signed Tyronn Lue. And, I mean, gosh, I love to hate on the Clippers, guys. So I guess I got 5 more years of it to continue. But he's got $70 million in that span. I don't got that much money, so I shouldn't hate too much. Current state of the roster, though, Raphael, certainly competitive team. What do you think happens this offseason, and what fantasy questions could be answered from Los Angeles?
I think 2 questions are obviously what happens with Paul George and James Harden. The latter is an unrestricted free agent. How much do the Clippers want to pay to bring him back? Do they want to bring him back? I assume they do, just because of what they gave up for him in the trade during the season. So then you shift to Paul George. He has a player option, a little over $48 million. Does he opt out? Does he, try to go onto the open market? Does he opt in? If he opts in, do they potentially use that as a trade piece? Like we've heard reports of Philadelphia being highly interested in George to add him onto the wing. So he'll certainly have a market. I don't know. I just kind of feel like Terrence Mann is like the Western Conference version of Chris Boucher, where some people try to continue to make him happen in terms of fantasy value, but it's probably not going to ever happen, unfortunately. Like he'll certainly be in the lineup. He's probably too versatile for his own good in terms of how they use him at the Clippers. He's out there, gives them good defense, but when you have the mouths to feed that the Clippers do, he's kind of limited in terms of what he can give you fantasy-wise. So I think in terms of who we know is going to be back next season, it's Kawhi Leonard and Ivica Zubac from a fantasy standpoint for me.
All right. And I would expect to hear those two names, to be honest. Dan, is there anyone else that you would be throwing onto that list, or is it also a very short list for you?
If Paul George and James Harden leave, I could be drawn to Norman Powell. He's really just a threes guy in scoring, but I think he could potentially do more if there's more opportunity in the offense. But yeah, I mean, I think that this offseason really hinges on the decision of James Harden and Paul George. Also, Russell Westbrook has a player option. He's only due $4 million this year, or next year, excuse me. So I expect he'll probably opt out of that $4 million. Maybe not, though. I don't know. But yeah, this Clippers team, I think they did the right thing by locking in Tyronn Lue. Obviously, Kawhi Leonard's not going anywhere, so now it's just a matter of like who is going to come play with Kawhi. And I think it's pretty interesting that there's been so many rumors around Paul George potentially declining that player option because maybe he's lost faith in the ability of Kawhi Leonard to stay healthy. Obviously, Kawhi Leonard was awesome for fantasy purposes this year, but when it came to real basketball, dude wasn't able to play in the postseason. So that's obviously a concern if you're trying to, raise a banner in LA. That's, the Clippers have never won before. So yeah, this is going to look a lot more interesting come this offseason. But I would expect James Harden at least to come back. I think Paul George is the biggest question mark, whether he could dip, just given his age where he is and potentially what he could garner on the open market.
What's the percentage of Paul George making a return to Indiana?
Never say never, but I don't
think he's I'm gonna say like 30%.
I wouldn't even go that high. I think that ship has sailed. You
think he's at the
his
point
timeline doesn't really.
Contender only. Top of the top in the NBA, right?
I think city matters too.
Yeah,
like I want to go to Indianapolis.
He already did his time.
100%. Who goes back to Indiana? Nah, man, nah.
Yeah, that's true. I moved back to Pennsylvania after like 8 years, and I'm like, I'm moving right back out. So don't do it, Paul George. I take it back. We would love to see it in basketball, but health-wise, mentally-wise, don't do it.
Basketball, I feel you basketball-wise. It is an intriguing landing spot, and like obviously he could play right where that Siakam role was. And seeing him in a fast-paced offense like that would actually be pretty dope. But selfishly, I'm like, go to Philly, man.
Yeah, I mean, of course, the basketball enthusiasts and a lot of us always will spread the question of guys doing homecomings, going back to their teams. Durant to Thunder now has been a thing this offseason people have talked about. Doubt that ever happens either. But Paul George is an interesting one because you've seen Indiana make an Eastern Conference Finals already now. So, they're a few steps away. But on another team in the Western Conference, that is a few steps away. They kind of took a step back this year, though, the Sacramento Kings. They've had a lot going on with Mike Brown this offseason. We've talked a lot about Sabonis and De'Aaron Fox this season and a few other guys that take a leap forward. But Raphielle, same question about LA. I mean, what are the fancy questions for you with Sacramento this offseason? How can they be answered?
I think in terms of Sabonis and Fox, they're pretty much who they are. I don't think that's going to change. Now, obviously, the Mike Brown situation will certainly have an impact. If he were to leave, find a better offer somewhere else or just play it out in the final year of his contract, we'll see. But yeah, that's not a very smooth situation up there. They lost their associate head coach, Jordi Fernandez, who's now the new head coach of the Nets. So, all right, you've made this resurgence. I know they took a step back last season, but I think that was more about other teams in the West getting better. Like Oklahoma City and Minnesota improved significantly from last season to this season, just to name two examples. Then you look at next year, Memphis is going to be healthy and they should be considerably better. Houston, we've seen them make strides this season. So Sacramento is no lock to be a playoff team. So besides Fox and Sabonis, I think Keegan Murray, he was very good in his second season. I think there's more for him to do, though, because there are still some issues with it in terms of his aggressiveness offensively. So you want to see a little more there, and I think he can be that type of player in year 3. But Malik Monk's free agency is the big storyline for this group. I don't think they can afford to lose him, but I don't know if they can afford to pay him, just because he's going to be a very popular option on the free agent market. If he were to go somewhere where he could start, that would be big for his fantasy value, because I think his ceiling's a bit capped in Sacramento. So between him, getting Kevin Huerter healthy, he was a bit disappointing this season, I thought. Harrison Barnes, he'll be available, but he's not someone you're going to be counting on for high-level fantasy production. So, if some changes happen on the wings, maybe a Keon Ellis steps up to be a potential late-round guy in fantasy. Yeah. But they need to make things right with Mike Brown, in my opinion, just because of the work he's done there in 2 seasons at the helm.
Yeah, he's definitely building them up. And you don't want – 2 years ago, and that success that they have in that postseason series be the top of the success that they've had in his tenure, or like over the last 5 years. You don't want that to be the best basketball we've seen from them. I'd like to see the Kings get better. But what you said about the Western Conference getting better this year and next year too, it's a very good point that you're going to need a lot to keep up with these Western Conference teams. So, Dan, what do you think can happen with Sacramento this offseason? And do you think they can be a playoff team next year? Or do you agree that they could get passed up? They're no lock.
This division is all over the place right now. Mm-hmm. The Phoenix Suns, what are they going to do? The Lakers, they got to make moves. We just talked about the Clippers. The Golden State Warriors are a mess. I don't know. They need to lock up Mike Brown. Like that should be first and foremost. Like, get your head coach there. He's been a good look for the franchise. And then it's a matter of whether you pay Malik Monk. I think you give him the most money. I think they have his early bird right, so they should be able to offer him more than most, I think. Yeah, I think so. I think you got to bring back Malik Monk. I think he showed enough to be a 6th Man of the Year candidate. Arguably could have won the award if it wasn't for the late season surge for Naz Reid. Obviously, the chemistry that he has with De'Aaron Fox there. I think he was one of the key bright spots, along with Keegan Murray, who's going to be, rookie extension eligible, I think, in the coming year. I think he's 1 year away from that. So you're going to have to pay him too. I think you can let Harrison Barnes go at some point. I think that's just stalling, what we could see out of Keegan Murray from a playmaking and just usage growth standpoint. But yeah, I feel pretty good about the Sacramento Kings. Like, they're in a tough conference, obviously, but I think the way that this division is going, if they keep a lot of these pieces together, maybe add a couple more pieces to their front court to get a little bit more support for Sabonis, who was one of the best bigs in the league, build out some depth, man, they could definitely win the division. They're not going to go very far in the playoffs, but at least they're a playoff contending team, which is a far cry from what they used to be, right? Like, this was one of the laughing stocks of the league that now can actually be taken serious now that they got a couple of all-stars there with De'Aaron Fox. Well, one all-star in Sabonis, although De'Aaron Fox should be an all-star, but for whatever reason keeps on getting snubbed. But I love De'Aaron Fox, one of my favorite players in the league.
Yeah, certainly one of the most thrilling ones. And I think if, Indiana kind of looks like they've taken a little the Sacramento route and how they build their team and their tempo up and down the floor, playing fast pace. And I think that's just the key to Sacramento basketball. You get as many guys to fit that bill of basketball, and that's the best that they can be. But I feel like I learned a lot heading into next season, talking with you guys. By the time we get together next week, we'll either be talking game 2 probably of the NBA Finals, or maybe earlier than that, depending on
in game 1.
Yeah,
because the series, it won't start until June 6th, no matter what. So
okay, so that's good news then. I was hoping the T-Wolves could make us wait a little longer, but I guess it does not matter. So that's good news. But before we get out of here, though, we do need the predictions, gentlemen. Whether or not Dallas or Minnesota makes it, who do you like to be the NBA Finals champion and how many games? Raphael, I'll start with you.
We have to pick it now? So it'll be on next week.
Because you pick it now, and then you change it. I want to see if you change your opinion.
It's Boston for me. I think they've clearly been the best team in the NBA this season. So if it's Dallas, you have 2 interesting returns to former spots between Kyrie and Porzingis. The fan receptions for both will be interesting. Kyrie, just please don't try to sage the court before game one. Like that's
Come on, get rid of that negative energy. I'm all about that.
Yeah. I feel you. I'm all about saging things, but don't do that. But yeah, I think I'm gonna say Boston in 6, regardless of who they play.
Nice. That's actually how I was feeling. I was liked Boston in 6 over Dallas. The Minnesota got the win last night. I'm like, hold on, maybe I'll think more about this now. But we know the Boston Celtics play with their food. So I joke about I want to see if you guys change your opinion next week, but it'll likely be me who's changing my opinion. Dan, who do you like right now while we still got the series in Western Conference to be finished out?
I think Boston 6 seems safe. And RIP to Bill Walton, man. Dude was a legend.
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel like Boston, they play with their food, as you said, Vaughn. And I don't know. I think we could get those spike, Luka 40-point nights, Kyrie going for 35 with the Sage. Yeah, I feel like they can at least get 2 games. That's assuming, they get there. But even if it's the Timberwolves, I would still probably say Boston in 6.
Yeah, no matter who Boston's playing, I'm going to be taking the opposite team in game 1 because they never come out prepared. So that's something that I'll be talking about, dropping gems there. But it was a great show. As always, gentlemen, I got the puppy gnawing on my toe, so it is time to go. But Raphielle Johnson, NBC Sports, you can find all his work there for the rest of the season and the offseason and NBA draft coming up. Dan Titus, I stay getting your notifications on my phone from Yahoo Sports. So I always see your great work all the time as well, my man. Make sure you guys check that out. And I am Vaughn Dalzell at V Money Sports. I'll be doing lunch money sprinkles Monday, Wednesday, Fridays. But I'll see these guys next Friday. And thank you, Adam, for producing. Thanks, dogs, for being good pups. We'll see you next week.